Hello, friends, relatives, community. Thank you all so much for being with us here today for this very special conversation on rematriating our land. This event, as well as the 4 other Ripple Week sessions we're hosting this week, are part of WIA's U.S. Grassroots Accelerator for women, environmental and climate leaders. And we're really excited to be offering these sessions to our larger community, not just our accelerator cohorts, for the first time ever this year. And you're all a part of that. So we're very, very excited. Ripple Week is a series of free events meant to inspire, mobilize, and amplify critical grassroots solutions that are poised to meet this moment on the planet and for our communities. So we hope you'll join us tomorrow and on Thursday as this powerful and inspiring week continues. Before I dive in and introduce myself and our very special guest, some notes about caring for our virtual space today. Here on Zoom, we have things set so that everyone is muted upon entry. If you have a question or comment, please be sure you're using the chat function to let us know. Our team will be monitoring that. I'll likely be looking over at our chat periodically, but time permitting, we're also hoping to have a Q&A session towards the end of our call. And I'll either be able to read some questions from the chat at that time, or we'll invite you to unmute yourself so you can ask your question then. In the meantime, please go ahead and drop your name and where you're calling from, the lands in which you call home over in our chat so we can all start to get related. And finally, if you need any technical assistance, please let us know in the chat box and our tech team will reply to you directly. With that little bit of housekeeping done, my name is Kahea Pacheco, and I am one of WIA's co-directors here at Women's Earth Alliance. For those of you who are new to WIA, Women's Earth Alliance is a 16-year global initiative that trains, resources, and catalyzes grassroots women's networks to protect our environment and build safe and healthy and just communities now and into the future. Since 2006, WIA has worked at the intersection of women's rights and the environment, creating programming, serving grassroots leaders around key environmental themes of climate resilience, water, land, agriculture, energy. And in partnership with both national and global organizations and networks, WIA co-designs capacity building trainings where women leaders access technology, finance, mentorship, and a global alliance. And while we're gathering virtually today, and while WIA has a global team located around the world, WIA's home base is located in what is currently known as Berkeley, California, in the Bay Area in California, but what is also known as Huichin, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people. And I want to thank our Ohlone relatives for allowing us to call this place home. I also want to acknowledge the lands and waters that I come from and where I am currently located, which is the Moku Puna on the island of Hawaii, and the waters of the Pacific that hold my ancestors and our people together. In both these places, WIA recognizes that these are stolen lands, and we as an organization and as community members have a responsibility to do all that we can to be good guests of these lands if we are visiting in other territories, and good guests of those original stewards. And while land acknowledgements are an important first step, we believe they must always be followed up with action. In Huichin, we take action by naming the ongoing and normalized colonization of Indigenous lands, by speaking the original name of this land, by collaborating with local Ohlone leaders like Karina Gould, who's a spokesperson for the Confederated Villages of Lejeune Ohlone, and who is also a designer and facilitator in the U.S. Grassroots Accelerator, and through our Shumi Land Tax, which supports our colleagues at the Sigorte Land Trust as they do the important work of rematriating their lands. And we do this because we envision a future that is not only thriving and sustainable, but just. And with that, because it so perfectly weaves into today's conversation, I'd like to introduce today's speaker and topic. Today, we're joined by Casey Kemp, wife, mother, grandmother, elder, and tribal councilwoman of the Ponca Tribe in Oklahoma. Casey is a longtime Native rights activist, environmentalist, and actor. She is devoted to helping maintain the cultural identity of the Ponca Nation for herself, her family, and her community. Casey has been at the forefront of grassroots community efforts to educate and empower both Native and non-Native community members on environmental and civil rights issues for many, many years. She is a powerful protector and defender of her people and Mother Earth, and a global leader in the rights of nature movement. She has spoken at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues and currently serves as the chair of the Indigenous Council for the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. She has also been instrumental in passing a resolution to put a moratorium on fracking and injection wells within her tribe's territories. You know, for decades, the Ponca people have been experiencing what amounts to environmental genocide, living in one of the worst fossil fuel impacted areas in the United States. More than 10 years ago now, I believe, I had a conversation with Casey in which she shared that as a result of the environmental violence her people were experiencing, environmental violence which resulted in ballooning rates of cancers in her community, she was at one point needing to attend ceremony and a funeral each week to say goodbye to relatives and community members. And her leadership, advocacy, and vision has been key to safeguarding her community's health, land, and future generations. And we are so excited and so honored to have Casey as a leader in the VIA U.S. Grassroots Accelerator program, and to have her here with us today to talk about her vision for rematriating land, particularly through the Ponca Earthen Lodge. So without further ado, it's my very, very deep honor to welcome you, Casey, to this conversation. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thank you for those really kind words. I think that it's important to say that none of those make any real sense to a person that feels committed as a tribal elder to ensuring the generations to come to have food and water, air, and earth. It's an honor to serve, and it always sounds a little bit funny to me when I hear all of those nice things that oh gosh, that happened. That's true, and yet I'm just one. This is part of a collective. I'm part of my mama and my grandmas, my grandpas, my companion, my children and grandchildren and great grandchildren, and the earth herself and the water herself. So yeah, it sounds pretty keen, but when you really put in all the players, it's just me getting the honor of being a Ponca grandma. And I want to invite the true guest of honor, the sacred water, to stand witness at this time to these words. There was a time in our history of the Ponca, at least, that we didn't go anywhere and say words without a witness being there to testify to the truth and veracity of our statements, and to be able to go back home and to tell the people what was said. And we stayed true. Nowadays, we talk in this cyberspace way. And so I ask the water to bear witness to these words. And that's something we all share, that travels everywhere. Indari wakanda khube wibla ehe manja khube wibla. Asking you, Great Spirit and Earth Mother, to join us together in this grand circle of being, to be able to lift our minds, hearts, and spirits into the oneness that's necessary at this time, that sometimes we've forgotten that we forgot. I heard those words recently and it struck a chord in me. So wake us up as we remember to stay consciously kind and loving and connected in a good way. for all of those in our hearts, minds, and homes right now. All the bloodlines, all the connections to all that is. We're asking for help and help through these sacred ways, through the sacred water. Though my name is colonized name anyway, is Casey Camp-Horinek. Judy with the Ponca Abri Manchte Ponca, Oklahoma. Judy is my true name. I live in the occupied territory of Oklahoma as a result of a forced removal of my people from Nebraska or Nebraska. This was the homelands to the Wichita, where Wakanda saw fit to have them caretake for millenniums. And when the colonizers came, they forcibly removed 36 other tribes. There were 3 indigenous to this territory into this small area. Among them were the Ponca from Nebraska. Nebraska is its name for real. And my grandpa was 6, and my grandma was just ready to be born at that time. Our trail of tears, we lost 1 in 3. So right now, I want you to look at your own family in your mind and imagine all your loved ones being swept up in a tide of aliens, I guess, maybe whatever way you want to picture them. Someone who didn't speak your language or understand your ways, someone who didn't listen to the Mother Earth and the winds, who didn't care for the sacred fire and the waters, but wanted you gone. And they put a gun to your back and they moved your children and your women into a section and raped and murdered as they moved you along, and they kept your men shackled so that they couldn't protect you. And then they walked you for 700 miles. My grandpa was 6. Yeah, that's the stories that my mama, who was born in 1914, of the first generation to be born in captivity on a reservation, a POW camp. The stories of them grabbing our children by their braids and tossing them into the wagons and keeping them separated as hostages, having to leave behind the food, the hunting instruments, the gardening instruments, the seeds, and everything to make this trip down here. And our story, my family's story, the story of the Ponca, is just one in hundreds and hundreds of stories like that. And I always have to remember the Zapatista, that saying that said, and they thought they buried us, but they didn't know we were seeds. So I'm that seed. I'm that human. I'm that blessed one that my folks saw fit to resist and to bring along so that I could be here today with you. And I know each of you has a story just like that in a different way. And so when today's topic came up, rematriation, it had some understandings within that framework for me, because it was the grandmas and the aunties and the daughters who were the ones that were so cared for and sheltered to the greatest degree by the men folks, by the ones who had lost their ability to be able to hunt for us. They still planted those gardens. They still did their best at a time when many of us were doing what came to us. We knew that we could carry children. We knew how to care for them in the best way we could. We had a way of continuation with the water and the earth. They had a different road. So this rematriation is made possible by the rebalancing of all of those things, because then became another time of boarding schools and where the patriarchal religions overcame the religions of our people that understood the value that the universe is male and female. You know what? I bet there's probably questions and stuff you can ask me. I just kind of get into visiting with these women folks, and it wouldn't stop. You know, I told my poor children, my two daughters and sons, that this little switch happened when I turned 50. I'm 74 now. And it was like wisdom just started flowing, you know. I almost have no control sometimes. So let's talk and visit.
I'm so open and welcoming to that wisdom flowing, and so grateful for all the sharing you're doing. I wanted to thank you first too for bringing in the water and for presencing that. Water is very special to my people too. Like in the Pacific, we see water as, we don't see ourselves as living in islands separated by water. We see ourselves connected by that water, living in water that connects all of us. So I appreciate you bringing, and I have so much gratitude for you bringing water and into this conversation as a witness and as a reminder to us of what we are serving here. So thank you, and for grounding us in that history and that legacy, which is the foundation now of so much of the systems that we have, and so much of what our communities are working to heal, a lot through that land rematriation. And I was wondering if, I think it's so important that Indigenous women, wisdom and science and our ways of knowing be recognized as critical to addressing so many of those imbalances that you were speaking about. So many of the imbalances that we see in the world today, particularly with the health and stewardship of our land. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about how your own learnings and the things that are kind of coming through you now, that wisdom switch that really turned on when you met that kind of milestone of 50 in your life, how that has shaped how you approach kind of this really heart-centered service that you're offering to the world through the work that you do.
It's been interesting to view the teachings that I have through the lens of America, or through the lens of the wider society that has amalgamated and homogenized itself into a mindset that was forced on us through the educational system, through the social system, through the religion, through the doctrine of discovery, through the forced removal of our children from our homes. And for let's say Americans in general, the same thing was happening to them when this educational system began to pull the children out when they were very young, and very narrowly confined the manner in which they were taught. So it was very cookie cutter. Everybody's supposed to look like this. Everyone's supposed to learn this way. Everyone's supposed to speak this language, which has turned out to be an advantage in many ways, because here we are communicating in this way. Everyone was supposed to believe the history that they were given. Everyone was supposed to forget their background and do the American thing. I always have these little bits of issues when I see people that come into this territory, this portion of Mother Earth, with the idea of saying that they're coming to follow the American dream, that they're coming to follow the money, that they believe that success belongs within a framework that is structured, that is the opposite of the way that I grew up. And where the value system was based on accumulation rather than how much you give away. It's a big joke to our family right now because my granddaughter is the Ponca princess. And that just means she's a young woman who is selected to serve as an ambassador and to continue the ways. And our whole thing now is to continue to accumulate so we could give it away, because that's what we do every weekend. She called me from college today and said, we're having an MMIW panel, Grandma, and I need some gift bags for all of those that are coming. What do you have? And so I called the rest of the family and we began to accumulate those things. But that's the difference in the approach to life in general. We live in a community here that has a huge mortality rate from cancers and autoimmune diseases and every ill that the extractive industry could lay on us, socially, emotionally, culturally, financially, and on and on and on. But we live in a community of families, of clans, and we help each other. When there are funerals, and you mentioned that at one time I was attending one every week, it was because I had to be there for emotional support, but it was also to take food. It was also to bring the things that were necessary for the families to get through what they had to get through, to even be able to afford to have a funeral. We have to come together. I've learned recently in the last 10 years, I should say, about those things, PayPals and stuff, right? That's the name, huh?
Yeah.
And
PayPal.
where people ask for help from one another and good people contribute. That's our way. That's just our way. It just makes sense because each one of us are going to have those places in our life where we're going to need the support. We just have managed to hang on to what we have to be able to know that certain songs at certain seasons, at certain times have to be sung because we're still trying to live within the natural laws. We're still trying to follow those prophecies that told us that this time that is called climate change to us is the purification. And that's when the Earth Mother, the Father, Son, the Moon, she also is part of the sacred dance of rebalancing. And that it would be disruptive in terms of the floods and the fires and the droughts and the water becoming, having to be acknowledged for the precious being that she is. And that as we begin to see these things happen, and folks begin to call us environmentalists, which is also pretty funny if you think about it. To me, it is anyway, because that's just being a responsible portion of life, to care about things. So, it's like if you eat, if you breathe, and if you drink, you're connected to all that is. And wouldn't it make good sense to kind of care about all that stuff? So your body can be nourished and you can take care of everything around you and it can take care of you. It seems like science, Western science, may someday catch up with us. They're so silly. They are so silly. Yeah, just to the genetically modified seeds of things. What do they think they're doing to their own bodies? What do they think they're doing?
Praise you.
Back at you, sister. I hear you. And I hear the seeds. And I hear the water. And I hear the winds. And I hear the earth. And they don't speak to me in this same voice as you and I are sharing right now. They speak to me through my inner being, through my feelings, through the intention, and energy follows intention, So when we come together at times like this, we're setting intention as well. And we're opening up that energy to feed one another, to be able to find those spaces and believe in them again. Remember that we have to believe when we're given these instructions through our guts, through our hearts, through our minds, that means act on them. It means warrior up. Do what you have to do, and be a good ancestor right now, so that when history looks back at us, I'm just going to be so proud of us. I don't know if that answered you. Let me try some coffee and see if that helps.
That answered just questions I didn't know I should have asked, as well as questions I did ask. So yes, thank you for that. You spoke a little earlier about the women who were able to hold on to some of the ways, especially during, the forced removal. And I met you back in 2011 when we and Indigenous Environmental Network, our friends at Indigenous Environmental Network, were having our advocacy training, where we brought Indigenous women leaders who were seeking like legal or advocacy support together with our network of pro bono attorneys and business leaders to facilitate these kinds of deep conversations and meaningful collaborations to really support the work that you're all doing. And then you're also now a part of LEA's U.S. Grassroots Accelerator with 27 other women throughout the U.S. and U.S. territories. And I see some of them on this call here, some of your sisters on this call. And I was wondering if you can talk a little bit, kind of threading all of those things together, about why women's leadership, particularly Indigenous women's leadership, is and has been so necessary for protecting our planet and for this kind of work we're doing and calling to rematriate the land.
I have a difficult time, I should tell you, being able to separate out the pieces of these things, because everything is such a whole. There, there are pieces that are called law, and attorneys that are practiced in that form of written law. And there are those of us who also understand law, but we understand natural law.
Yes.
And it will endure, and it always has. So I think that there are the gifts of those things that begin to associate themselves with one another. And within the area that I'm being led to participate in as an elected leader, but also as a Nudahanga Ponca Palata, as a hereditary leader, drumkeeper within the Women's Society that came down through my grandmas and grandpas and my mother and my sister and myself now, and my daughters and granddaughters. There's also a teaching. And those teachings have to do with always staying present in today. And I feel as if that's why I'm with you right now, is that oftentimes we have been relegated, we Indigenous women, to be an artifact, to be sensed as an object that has uses, but not as a movable piece of the partnership in the universe. And there are universal laws in place that, despite what some religions might say, and that's where, for me, the doctrine of discovery just kind of messes up all the balance, that those imbalances are created when you and I, begin to not believe in the power that is inherent in our being. And we begin to believe the stories that are fed to us of who we are supposed to be and how we are supposed to be And we forget the uniqueness of what any portion of Mother Earth that we're inhabiting at the moment has to give to us. She nurtures, she cares, she is unconditional love. That's us, because aren't we her? I mean, truly, is there any separation that any of you can genuinely give me as an example of why we are not? I don't think so. You know, I did have a good relative down there that I constantly quote from South America, one of the Indigenous sisters down there who, you know, we in Standing Rock would call ourselves water protectors and land defenders. And in truth, we are not protecting nature, right? We are nature. We are nature protecting itself as human beings. And we happen to be the feminine force in that balance. And that feminine force has a life of its own and a power of its own, just as words do and deeds do. And so only when we give away that belief in ourselves do we find ourselves at odds and in fear of what's coming next, because we are a contemporary being. We were born at a particular time. We were born into a particular situation. Our mothers, our fathers, that first seed, that first egg, already had a purpose within it, all those genetic memories, all of the energies that they went through and the generations before them live within that original cell that is the original you. And then they tell us that we put a robe on over this spirit that we're wearing as we walk this red road on earth. And the spirit is leading, but the robe that we're wearing is part of that wholeness that brings not only the spirit into this world, but the physical self as a guide for us. And I'm wondering all over the place. I'm just pretty sure you asked a more direct question. I'm going to try to stay a little more focused.
No, that was absolutely focused. That definitely answered my question, and it brought up. I love the idea of like just the reminder, not even idea, the reminder that there's no separation between us and the earth that we say we're protecting. I love how you said, like, aren't we protecting ourselves? And I remember Gudgy Cook, who is a Mohawk elder and midwife, says women are the first environment. And when I heard that for the first time, that's where I kind of recognized that interconnected, that sameness, that, you know, that mirror that we're looking at, that we are the earth and we are this land and this water. So I just thank you for bringing that into the conversation. And it leads me to these questions about, I know you've been doing a lot of work around in the past years, the rights of nature and advocacy around that. And I was wondering if for those who are joining us today and may not be familiar with the rights of nature, could you share a little bit from like your own perspective and your work, what that is, or the need for that recognition and the work that you've been engaged in around it?
Yeah, I believe it was 2011, as a matter of fact, that same year. I was at a gathering with Women's Earth and Climate Action Network where 100 women came together from around the globe to talk about this lifetime that we're living right now. And I had heard someone talk about rights of nature, and it became kind of a stubborn spot in me because they were talking about laws that were being made. And, you know, I remember my brother Carter Camp, who was leader of the American Indian movement and huge influence on me as well, had talked about, for instance, and I believe it was 1978, when the United States passed the Freedom of Religion Act for Native Americans. Native Americans, that's so stupid anyway. And he said, sis, if we had true freedom of religion, why would they have to pass a law around that? That really struck me. And so when I heard about rights of nature and municipalities and other areas passing laws around recognizing that nature had rights, recognizing more and more, I had to begin to delve into that thought a little bit deeper. And it took me years to arrive at a comfort zone, to understand why we're being led down that path. I don't believe that any of us who are focused and asking for direction, sometimes when you receive it, it's not exactly in the form that you thought it would be. And certainly that was true for me. But the rights of nature, as it turns out, has a certain understanding within the context of Western law of how we can align natural law with the laws that we are having to deal with, since we've had, for instance, as a Ponca, we have 5 treaties that have been abrogated. We have had a total, our trust responsibilities were all broken through the treaties. And so how do we go about utilizing the original instructions and putting them in a form of Western law that not only recognize what has always been, but also puts it in a form of a statute that will recognize that and also say, so if we believe that all things have a right to exist, because humans are so close to extinction, it's really, it's kind of silly. I'm not gonna dwell on that because it's not gonna happen, but we could be foolish enough to continue to foul our nest so we can't live in it unless we pay attention and find these small ways forward. Rights of nature for me was one of those openings where if we did a statute that it was in the Ponca law and therefore translates into the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Department of Interior, and the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, and it at the same time enhances that immutable understanding of the oneness of all, then it would give us a place to not only have that in our laws, because we do have courts, we do have a constitution, we do have a form of prosecution that would give us the opportunity to prosecute those that harm our relatives, the water, the air, the earth, the fish, the deer, the buffalo, the future of our children, the fires, and so in 2017, we passed a moratorium on fracking and injection wells. We passed a law that says that Keystone XL could not come through our territory, present or our traditional territory in Nebraska. We passed a rights of nature statute that said, if you continue to do the things that you do, and we can bring you into our courts, which is still an issue, because the law is set up to protect people in our territories, but not us in theirs. So then we will hold the corporation heads culpable for what they're doing, not the poor guys trying to make a living and feed their families, but the ones who are making these decisions. And so after traveling to New Zealand, Ecuador, and various other places and visiting with Indigenous peoples in those territories, the Wanganui River being recognized, the personhood of, and the Ecuadorian building into the Constitution rights of nature. There's been this huge expansion of knowledge. So we recently on July 6th, I presented a resolution to the council on the rights of the rivers in our territory to exist in their wholeness. And that was passed as well. So the feeling is not only are we doing what we are supposed to be doing in terms of recognizing what already exists. It's not like we're granting something or, but simply to recognize what already exists and to put it into a written form. So those fools who don't listen to natural law will have an actual written form that they can look at and say, oh, wow, you mean we can be prosecuted for putting our fracking fluids in there? And we have then also got a leg to stand on when we begin to pull them into our courts.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing that and for sharing a little more about the rights of river statute. I know that right now you have, you're working on your vision for the Ponca Earthen Lodge. And I wanted to shift over to that, recognizing kind of our timing and everything, and see if you would be able to share with us what that vision is and perhaps the history of Ponca Earthen Lodges and the importance of that work and that land rematriation.
Originally being of a Northern Plains people, we had 19 village sites that we moved to and eventually ceded over 2.5 million acres to the government that they recognized as Ponca territory. Because for us, we recognized it because we lived between Nishude and Nibalala, and where the winds came from and the breath of the Creator through the earth. And so that was the Missouri River is Nishude. Nibalala is a swift running river, and then Wind Cave over there is what they call it up there in the Black Hills. And when our territory began to shrink and we were forcibly removed, we had to move into square houses. But prior to that, we had buffalo hide teepees and we had earthen lodges. And the earthen lodges were made to be a place of coolness in the summer and warmness in the winter. And originally our relatives, the Arikara, who were right upstream from us, came to the Ponca and we made a trade. And it's a big, long history there because everything is shared with everyone, but it's done in a sacred manner. And those lodges were made with the idea that they're round, they're part of the earth, not separated from, so that the energy is always good there. It's a certain level underneath the earth. The trees are not cut down from fresh wood, but they're from wood that needs to be thinned out of an area so that it would stay healthy. And they have alignment with the stars. There's a place for a fire in there. And when we were forcibly removed from our territory, the way of living and the way of being had to shift into the Western civilization's understanding of how we were supposed to live. And so for 153 years, I believe it is, there hasn't been one in our area. And as well as many other peoples looking for a way in this time of purification or climate change, it is something that I know is correct for my people. Housing is a big problem. Ceremonial spaces are a big problem. Many of us don't feel comfortable going into those square buildings where they try to scare you about God, you know, instead of embracing the lovingness of Wakanda and the lovingness of Earth Mother. And so to have these earthen lodge made, for us, it will be large enough for meeting places so that we can bring women together with their children to be able to run and enjoy and be there. There's, you make benches right out of the earth itself. They're covered with sage, and there's whole stories behind that. Part of the natural law of understanding what the stars are doing and when the planting time should be are told to you through the opening of these earthen lodges as well. The lodges themselves are often covered, so there's a structure that is of the logs like this, and then the logs like this, and then an opening there and a fireplace down here, and a large bench that goes all the way around where people can sleep and eat and meet and pray. But also the outer portion of the lodge itself is covered with medicinal plants and things that you would want to have preserved for the winter time. Inside the lodge, then those roots, the potatoes, the wild potatoes, the wild turnips, the berries, the things that you're going to store can be stored in there as well, because that's like the old-fashioned root cellars that the pioneers always talked about. The idea that then there could be individual village sites made of those. So like some folks talk about the tiny houses. Conversely, the same thing can be happening with these things, so you don't have energy bills that you have to deal with all the time. It also is protection in climate change. Our tornadoes are much bigger than they've ever been before. These are tornado resistant. They're fire resistant. We have bigger ice storms. That wouldn't bother an earthen lodge at all. And so it has all of the simple complexities of protection, of living in a circle as we're supposed to be. All things live in a circle, you know, the birds have nests, on and on. So yeah, so these earthen lodges are inevitably going to be part of the future.
You know, I love that it's also, you know, going back to this idea of Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous wisdom, and these Western ways of knowing. It's a recognition of that wisdom, and it's bringing it in because it's a solution. It's a solution to the needs our communities have.
Yeah.
So I love that, and I want to give people time for questions if they have. But before we jump into questions, I was just wondering if we could wrap up with a final question I have. And I'd love to know, like really what your dream is in whatever way that comes through and you want to share for this next generation and the ones that will follow.
It's going to be their dream. It's going to be your dream. It's not my job to tell you what your dream should be. It is my job as a mama, grandma, and great grandma, as a matriarch, as a descendant, to put all the information that I've been blessed to share and to receive into your hands. Because just like my mama had always pointed out to us, you know, there's some purists that were trying to find their way back, you know, in terms of beadwork one day, and we were all sitting around with Mama, and she always did everything so simply, and her understanding was so clear. But they were talking about glue. You use glue when you make medallion? You shouldn't be doing that. And she just laughed and she said, you think that we didn't have our own form of glue, or you think if we had it, we wouldn't have used it? You know, it's about living in the moment that you are in. That's why we as Indigenous people have continued to be in these leadership positions. We're not leading from way back there. We're leading from right now. What are we dealing with right now? What are the solutions right now? Utilizing that incredible knowledge in a very contemporary way.
Whew. Thank you. Thank you so much, Casey, for this deep and inspiring conversation, for that wisdom that you shared. I know we have a couple questions definitely already, so I wanted to hopefully get to them. If you don't mind, Heidi asked if you could share more around the idea that the climate crisis is a form of purification.
Thank you, Heidi. I think I think you could answer that. How is it? What happens when the fire burns? And you have to be creative about how things are going to be there. What happens when floods happen along the coast of Florida and folks have to readjust to what they have done to the swamps there and how they've clear cut the forest, and how do we adjust to the droughts? We learn to conserve water. We learn to make more with less. We learn to think about our neighbors and to understand that we can't continue to use the waters as a dumping ground for the extractive industry to suck up for fracking or to utilize in the manner. When we talk about carbon trading, does that really make sense to buy and sell the air? You know, all of those things are forms that the earth is speaking. She is saying, look, if you tear up this portion of the earth, then we're going to have a little flood down there to kind of rebalance that area. And maybe these humans, which sometimes act as ticks or fleas and just kind of suck the life out and carry disease, maybe they're going to have to be a little bit more thinned out. Maybe they're going to have to learn a little bit of a lesson in order to coexist. That's purifying mind, body, and thought. Only it happens to be the earth and the air and the fire and the sun and the moon that are making these things possible. And we as participants are also experiencing those. But it's just a different word for the same thing.
Thank you, Casey. Aima is wondering, what are you most passionate about, or what brings you joy?
What doesn't?
Best answer. Oh, I think that's a really good question for a lot of us to meditate on. Alex, I think we have this time for one more question. I'm going to try and squeeze one in. Alex asked, how do you approach people about climate, I'm assuming climate change or climate work, who do not have an innate sense of nature? Perhaps
I was really taught that truth has a power of its own. And I believe that. I think that if one speaks the truth as one knows it to be, then that power carries and it is felt as much as it's heard. And once we internalize that thought we just spoke of, that we're not here protecting nature, we are nature protecting itself, then we begin to do what is necessary to make the changes that have to happen. You know, it seemed very simply put to me one time when I was really young about the association of the body with all of the what's called nature, the natural elements. What do you call nature? Do you call nature plants? Well, I eat those, and so they become me. And then I excrete those as well, and they become part of Earth again. And the cycle is ongoing. Do you call nature berries? Do you call nature a buffalo? Do you call nature the air that you're breathing or the water that you're drinking? If so, that's you too, you know. So for me, it's just pretty elemental to have us recognize that there isn't any separation. When our body leaves, and in our way of speaking, we just say a person's name, dengue. That means that, and if you might say, if you run out of coffee, it's Ponca dengue. So you just kind of ran out. Body's going to run out. When that happens, the warmth of the fire, the inner earth and the sun leaves, and the body gets cold. It dehydrates because the water is no longer flowing in it, you know, and the veins of the Mother Earth and the veins of the human are the same. The breath, the wind, that also leaves, and the body quits being part of that. It's all just so obvious. So what do I say? I speak the truth as I know it and as I see it.
Thank you so much. I think that's all the time we have for questions. Before we wrap things up, there's just a few things I wanted to be sure to share. Our team is going to put on screen right now a slide that has Casey's information in case you'd like to get in touch with her directly about her work or the Ponca Earthen Lodge vision. You'll also see that our next Ripple Week event will be tomorrow at 2 p.m. Pacific time, and we'll be joined by Leah Penniman, who will be talking with us about the exciting land and food-based liberation work they're doing at Soulfire Farms, and we hope you'll join us for that. And we're going to be sending an email where you will be able to get a recording of the call. Should you have any, if you want to share that or you weren't able to catch the entire thing. And there will be links and action items. And then also in the chat and through the QR code that we'll put up on screen, you'll see a link to a feedback form. And we'd love for you to fill that out. It'll help us continue to improve our events and provide you with as much points of connection with the powerful work of grassroots women who are doing the work that they're doing in our communities in the world. And then finally, I wanted to extend my deepest gratitude to you, Casey, for spending this time with us today, for sharing so much of yourself and your work, and for all that you're doing for our communities and the earth. As an Indigenous woman in this movement, I can't tell you how often I've looked to you and your presence over the years as an inspiration and model for what leadership can be. And we're very humbled and grateful to have you in our alliance and to be able to support your vision in all the ways that we can. So I just wanted to extend my gratitude and say mahalo nui loa from me. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Please look up Casey's work and the Ponca Earthen Lodge and the amazing advocacy she is doing for her communities and for all of our communities on the earth.
Thank you. Thank you all. And thank you for your beautiful words. I really want to also just say so clearly that all of you young folks are my role models as well. I learn all the time. And I thank you very much. And one thing we all need to do is just express gratitude constantly to the sacred ones that we share life with. So thank you, Sacred Water.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, guys. Or good day, wherever you are.